Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Good Cuppa of LLJ. Welcome, Red Hot Ricky Diamond.
How are you, mate?
Pretty good yourself?
Yeah, doing well. Keeping well.
Oh yeah, awesome stuff. I'll give people a brief backdrop. Brother of Dazzler Dunlop, had success in his own right. 23 years in professional wrestling, trained many in the business. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's a pleasure to be on. So, yeah, look, I suppose, yeah, it's when you sort of sit and reflect and think about how long it's been, it's pretty frightening. So, this year alone will be, I think, later this year would have marked 30 years since I had my first match this year. So, it flies. So, for all the young blokes out there, make the most of it because it goes pretty quick. So,
yeah, I'm about 36, and that like I'm only 36, but yeah, I know what you mean. Even though I'm only 36.
Yeah, look, it does. It goes really quick. And I mean, I've probably been most of my life anyway. So, I started out, as a kid. So naturally, with Ken being 10 years older than me, he was a teenager training. When I was only 6 or 7 when he started training. So. He used to train on a mattress out in the backyard, and eventually I sort of became his guinea pig, I guess. So he used to practice a lot of his stuff out on the mattress using me and my best mate who lived next door, who was the same age. So we used to go over there for ages and just let him throw us around and stuff like that. So that's kind of where it all started, really. So if you include those years, it's been well over 40 years. So it's
When I was
frightening
young,
when you think about it. Okay.
I was going to say when I was young, I know what you mean by guinea pig. I had like a mate who was 3 years older than me. So we had like other people in the neighbourhood who were like older than us, and I was the youngest. And so we'd play wrestle, and it was great fun for people to do like the grab you by the arms and swing you and throw you thing and give you wedgies and all that.
Yeah.
So I know what you mean by the guinea pig thing. Where I used to be the guinea pig myself.
Yeah. Well, see, I suppose it was probably good that we did that when I was young because obviously Ken was only 17 or 18 when he moved to Sydney. So lucky I still had my mate next door who we're still best friends with today. But we used to go out there and practice on our own for ages and ages and ages. And as we got a little bit older, we actually built our own little backyard rings. And the first one wasn't the best one. We had some star pickets and some ropes, and that was about it. And then we managed to find some wooden boards and some tires and just made our own little makeshift ring there. And we used to do like 30-minute matches out in the backyard just for a bit of fun. So, So I suppose that's where we sort of honed it all. But I didn't really have many places in Melbourne where I could train that I knew of anyway. So a lot of my training I did, like over the school holidays when I'd go to Sydney and stay with Ken. So we'd go down, a couple of days while I was up there and train down at Dovey's gym down at Oxford Street. So, which was a great experience. I loved training there. It was great because there's this ring just smack bang in the middle of the gymnasium. So you had all these big bodybuilders, lifting weights, and there was this puny little teenager flying around the ring. So it was pretty cool. Like, got to train with a lot of the great ones up there. Obviously, Ken, of course, but got to train a lot with Wayne Pickford and guys like Ace Frehley and Skyhawk and all those guys. We all sort of trained together. So it was really a good time, good experience. So yeah, and then
Awesome stuff. The
yeah.
scenery reminds me of there's a game that's come out called Retro Mania Wrestling. It's like a video game, and there's like in career mode they've actually got like a gym. There's a ring in the gym, and you practice your moves in the ring, but they have like a match on it.
Okay,
So yeah, sounds a lot like that.
like a simulator. Yeah, like it was really good. Like, but yeah, so I didn't have many places down here, and then I think about 1992, Ken was doing a show at the exhibition buildings in Carlton, and that was the night he introduced me to George Julio, who trains a lot of people down here. And I started going out training with George, once or twice a week, and then that kept going for months and months, and then eventually, George, he could see that I already had some experience, training and stuff, so he was sort of trying to push me to start actually working, and me being sort of the perfectionist, I'm like, no, I've got to get it right, so. And he used to come in every week. He'd be like, look, you're ready. I'm like, no. And anyway, this went on for about, I don't know, probably a couple of months. And George walked in one day and he's got this big grin on his face. And he's just looked at me. He's like, guess what? He goes, you're booked. You're doing your first match in 2 weeks. So, because I was, then I didn't have a choice then. So there was no more procrastinating. So off I went and had my first match in September '93. So yeah.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Like I've tried to train in wrestling. I never wrestled, but done like training, and just from my own experience, you overthink a lot, and it's hard to get out of overthinking.
Yeah, it is, and it's easy to sort of even when you're involved, it's sometimes you'll go through your head, you'll go through the match in your head 100 times, and if something doesn't work out, or the crowd don't respond the way you thought they would, or and it can throw you right out, So it's not the easiest, but it's it's so I tend not to, as I got older, got more experience. I tended not to worry too much about the match until I got there. You just work out you start and you finish, and maybe 2 spots, and that's it. The rest you just wing it. So I suppose not like today where the guys want to go through everything before they go out there, and I tried that when I was young, and I got about 2 moves in, and then I forgot everything. It just completely fucked the whole match up. So, so I've never been one to try and memorize a match, because it's just, doesn't work for me. So, just as long as and the more you work with people, the more spots you get with people. So the matches get better and longer anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think when you get more experience, you probably build up muscle memory and mental fitness. But with the current format, I reckon it would be hard for a lot of people, because they set out like the match like it's too how do I put it, like too refined, where they probably should have it old school where you go over the crowd and have a finish. But it seems to be like they'll book like every single move, and then when people stuff up spots and get injured, I think that's where the issue is, because they're trying to fit everything single move rather than just working the match.
Yeah, and the problem when they do stuff it up, they go straight back to it, and it just looks shit. Whereas when I know we were always taught that if you stuff up a spot, wait 5 minutes, go back to it later. Like just circle around it, do some other stuff first, then come back to it, and it'll look a lot better then. So
even some of the finishes don't make sense nowadays, where they get run over by a car or something, and then they get back up, and then they get beaten by a submission.
Yeah, well, that's the trouble. There's no story. There's no selling. There's just I can't really watch today's stuff. Today it's more like watching like Dancing with the Stars than bloody wrestling now. That's what it is to me. To me it was always about telling a story, and there's a good guy and there's a bad guy and there's a story, and you want to try and draw the crowd in. You want them to be part of the show. Whereas now they just want to go and do all these big spots and say, "Hey, look what I can do," and the crowd don't respond half the time because they're just whatever. They'll do a cheap pop for a big move and then they're just quiet again. They're not invested in the whole match. So
a lot of matches seem to be like a training match too nowadays, where they lack psychology and they're just spots like you're preparing for like an actual match where you're practicing the spots. That's what it looks like to me watching it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like when we used to, on the rare occasion, I actually got to work out with the guy beforehand. So sometimes we'd go down to George's during the week and work on stuff there. But we didn't go too crazy. Like we would sort of work out a bunch of stuff, but we wouldn't use all of it. It was just so, like, if I was working with someone, we might work out 6 or 8 spots, but we only might use 2 of them. You know what I mean? So, but it just happens so that if we get stuck or we're in a bit of a jam, we can go into that spot. And as soon as we see him, like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. I know what he's doing. And so we could just use it, if it was to fill some time or whatever. But whatever we didn't use, well, great, we've got stuff to use next time. You know what I mean? So, I don't like trying to put too much in. I always thought less was more. So a theory that I used to talk to a lot of my students about was not overdoing it. You don't want to give them 10 high spots in a match because people will go home and they'll sit there and they'll discuss the show and then they'll be just like, oh yeah, that guy was a good high flyer, but they couldn't name anything you did. Whereas if you did one big spot, they would go home and go, oh, that move, that was insane. That was, did you see when you did that? And, it stands out in people's memories, and the rest of the match could be, just average or just storytelling. But you just throw in that one big spot and everyone will remember what it was. So, big difference.
Yeah, it's also like a good example. One thing I was told, like with headlocks and stuff, no gaps. And there seems to be like a lot of people don't like cover up gaps, but I think that looks better than heaps of high spots if you get your basics right where you have no gaps.
Yeah.
And you sort of know how to make it look good with like the selling.
Well, that's the thing. You can because we call them rest spots. So you have a headlock or an armbar. It's just so you both have a bit of a breather, but you can still tell the story. You were still part of the match. It was still part of the show. You're still showing something. If the guy's got me in an armbar, I'm still selling it. I'm still showing the crowd that, hey, I'm in pain here. And so, but at the same time, we're having a bit of a rest. So I think that art has gone now because they're trying to squeeze everything into like 8 or 10 minutes. And so they're just trying to get as much into that time as they can rather than, stretching the matches out. And I know it's harder to get longer matches nowadays because they have, you might have 7 or 8 matches on a card nowadays, whereas we had maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 at the most, so the matches would go 15, 20 minutes minimum, so your big matches might go 30, 45 minutes, whatever it is, so even the opener would often go 15, 20 minutes. So I think that's a lost form nowadays as well. A lot of guys can't work 30 minutes anymore because they just can't, tell the story and they can't keep the crowds interested for that long. So that makes it real hard for the young kids because, and I suppose you can't really blame them too much because that's just what they've grown up with. Yeah, that's the style they're taught now. That's what they've learned. They haven't learned the psychology like we did. Yeah, so there was always, for us, it was always about the good guy versus the bad guy. Yeah, that's the way it was. So, if you were the baby face, you'd want them to feel sorry for you when you're getting beaten up. So when you do come back, they'll go crazy. And if you're the heel, well, the heel controls the match. Yeah, the heel controls the whole tempo of the whole match. That's the way it is. So, so if you've got a good heel, you're going to have a good baby face. So, but it doesn't always work the other way around. If a guy can't work as a heel, and the face has to carry it, then sometimes it makes a bit of a crappy sort of match. But I always think a good strong heel, anyone who can work. And the trouble is now, like I said, that art's lost. But these young kids, they come in and they're young and they've got great bodies and they look great and they want to be heels. You're like, dude, you can't. Just look at you. The girls in the crowd love you. Yeah, you can't be a full-on heel unless you're really playing up on your looks, of course. But you can't have everyone on the card doing that. So yeah.
I was brought up in like probably late 80s, early 90s, Attitude Era, 2000 sort of stuff, and then from there followed as a fan. But I think I become a full-fledged fan probably Attitude Era, but when I was little, I watched the Bret Hart era on and off, and would get like a lot of Coliseum video stuff and watch stuff on videotape. And so I had like an interesting time where I had like a bit of old school meets modern, but nowadays, I think people are used to the refined era where it's like spot, and they don't get like the larger than life personalities like they used to.
And that's why I find it so hard to watch now, mainly because of that. There's just, they don't have those interesting characters anymore. It takes time to develop that. I mean, you even look back to, you were talking about the Attitude Era, and that was fantastic. But you had a bunch of guys, you got guys like Austin and Michaels and Triple H, and they're all guys who started out in that more of an old school era with the late 80s, early 90s. So they came through that, sort of like a kayfabe type era. Yeah, so they had that appreciation for the old school, but they adapted well to the newer style as well. So they could sort of mix it up, but they knew enough where they could still get over with the characters. And there was a lot of guys that were around. It took a while to really develop those characters. Triple H even, when he started off, he had that the snobby sort of character, and even though he could work, to me he was kind of a bit boring to watch. As he developed and sort of changed his attitude into that more sort of the badass sort of guy with the became the game and all that. Then he became, to me, he was more exciting to watch then because he just had that mystique about him, and a lot of guys have that. Whereas now, I think the trouble now is they're sort of told what their names are, how they're going to dress. This is how you're going to speak. This is what you're going to say. Whereas I think guys back, and you look back to the sort of 80s and 90s, guys came up with their own names and their own gimmicks and their own image. And that's why they were so heavily invested in it. Macho Man, for example, everything he did came straight from his mind. The way the sequent robes and the way he would talk and all that all came from him. That wasn't someone in the backstage saying, I want you to talk like this and I want you to act like this and I want you to dress like this. So the guys back then obviously were much more invested in their characters because it came from them. Whereas now it's all sort of written for them. And so it's kind of like, we're not really seeing the true character from that person anymore. So makes it really hard to watch sometimes. So yeah. Anyway, that's my opinion. But, yeah.
Talking about robes, I noticed in Laz's Pro Wrestling fan group, your son wrote that Dad should wear his robe.
Yeah. Well, that one was one of Ken's originally. He had made, probably early 90s, I reckon. He had that made, I reckon. And after, when he retired, he gave that to me, and I loved it. Like, it's a really cool robe. So it's heavy, but it's it's really good. Yeah, it was just, you get the full wingspan, the whole thing. Yeah. So it was pretty cool. Stands out in the crowd too. So yeah, I think I actually wore that the night I had my farewell match. So yeah, no, I love that. I used to go a lot out with that, and jackets and vests and all that stuff. So unfortunately, I lost a lot of those over the years, and some just went missing and whatever. And, so I've still got the robe. I've still got a couple of jackets, but all up, I think I had about 15 different outfits made up over the years.
Right.
So I tried to never wear the same outfit 2 shows in a row. Always wanted to try and look different and fresh every time I worked. So yeah.
Did you feel like the robe gave you superpowers like a superhero?
It's kind of. It's hard. You feel different when you walk out. Of course, as soon as you're in character, you walk through that door and you feel like you're 2 feet taller and bulletproof, and there's just something about walking through that door or that curtain, or wherever you are, and it's just like the whole switch. It's just it's amazing. It's an adrenaline rush, and it's hard to explain that to people who haven't experienced it, of course, but it's pretty cool. So
Awesome.
nice feeling. So look, I know like we talk about different outfits, and I used to sort of get a lot of my inspiration off just whether it be other guys or just you look at certain colours, like you might see a football team, oh, those colours look good together, I might get an outfit done like that. And so it was just like I know my old partner Steve, I know you want me to talk about it, and I'm sure you've heard about the mint tights. So like that was just something that we got that stood out, made us stand out. So it wasn't actually the original plan. They were supposed to be like a teal blue with but then they didn't have the materials, so we went with the mint, and that but you had that with the leather jackets at the time, and we were sort of like a like a young rockers sort of that sort of gimmick at the time anyway. So we had the leather jacket, the sunnies, and the tights, and that was pretty good. We had to actually have the matching outfits, and it was a bit of fun. So worked in a few tag teams over the years, but that was probably one of the better ones I was with. We had a really good chemistry. So.
Did you see my hype video I did, sort of tongue in cheek, for like the mint tights? So I had like LLJ. I'm trying to remember. There was like a video I did where I'm hyping like the mint tights.
I know I copped a bit of that over the years. So, but I liked them. So and I think I still wore them even towards the end of my career, but like they're not as standout anymore. They're a bit faded now, but they were good fun. They were good fun. So, but I had all different colours. I had sort of like a peachy orange with purple, and I had the red. I had the dark green. I had the black, blue, and white, and I had I had a real mix of different ones. I had a full piece with the purple. To me, it was always just a matter of just looking different, standing out, Same with the jackets. I'd have either tassels on the jackets or I had a couple of vests made, sleeveless vests and coat tails sort of things. So, just like I said, it's just more about standing out. So that's what you want to do. These guys who, I suppose, in that era who are still just wearing the black trunks or the red trunks or whatever. You want to sort of stand out, make yourself look a bit different. So,
did you feel like with the mint tights that you're like rock stars, and did you like have the chicks running wild?
Yeah, well, that was the idea. Sort of that sort of image. It came out to rock music and stuff like that. So it was we'd come out all hyped up and pumping the crowd and high fiving everyone, and it was a really good time. Like, we had a lot of fun with that team, me and Steve, and probably one of my regrets is that we didn't stick it out for another year or two. Actually, I think we could have been one of the better teams around. Like, we certainly in our first year we went really well, and we did an angle where we did the split, and I turned heel on him, and we were building up to a big match at the end of the year, and then the promotion that we worked for sort of just came to an abrupt end, and so we never got to finish that angle. But I probably would have liked to have kept going with that one. If I had to go back again, I probably would have held off on the turn for another year or two. So because we had a really good chemistry. We had some good moves that we used to do together, and we understood each other really well. So and you get that.
Cheers, mate. No, I was just saying cheers, mate.
Okay. So look, you get some guys over the years. You could work with 100 or 200 different guys over the years, but you could probably count on one hand. The guys that you just, for whatever reason, you just click with. And there weren't. I was probably no different. I probably had 4 or 5 guys that, for whatever reason, we just absolutely clicked, and we could do matches without even talking to each other. Look, Steve was like that when we teamed, but there was other guys. But Chuck was one of those guys as well. We could have gone out there blindfolded and probably still done a half decent match. You had guys like Cobra, who I had some really good matches with that we just gelled. Blade was another one. Psycho, Kid Thunder. He's probably the one I worked with the most. So we knew each other that well by the end that we didn't even have to talk. We just knew. We could tell by body language. If he was climbing the ropes, I could tell just by the way he was climbing the ropes whether I had to stay down, get up, move, whatever. So we just got to know each other that well. So, and there aren't many guys you get that. So some guys that you think you're going to have great matches with, and then you come out and you think, oh, they kind of stunk a bit. And not necessarily anyone's fault. But sometimes things just don't work out and you just don't gel. So the guys you do gel with, you find that the promoters will book you more with as well over the years. So and the more you get to work, the better you work together. So there's 4 or 5 guys that I worked with quite a lot. So we got really good to it. When we worked with each other, so it was really good.
With when you turned on Stephen, did you sort of say to him, I'm turning on you, you made me look like an extra in the band ABBA. I didn't like looking like that, and you beat him up because of the mint tights.
No, it was really good at the time. The club we were at, like, you had Peter Ferry and Gene were doing most of the booking.
Oh yeah, Peter Ferry.
I did approach them about a storyline, an idea that I'd had. Building up everything with Steve, and we were going to do, because we were tag champions at the time, and so it was to build up to losing the titles and building up to me turning, and then doing another build up to when we finally worked together. And I said, look, I've got about 6 months worth of storyline. So what I did is I wrote it all down, and said, look, this is what we've got on mind. So we're going to do this match here and this match there. And they were all right with that. So they pretty much gave me free rein on being able to write the story. And they're like, you'll just let us know who you need each month and we'll book around the rest. That was pretty good, actually, having a bit of creative freedom. So that was it was a bit of a first, but I actually had it all written down, so I knew exactly what we had to do each month and each show. We built up beautifully, but then unfortunately those shows sort of came to an end. We did a bit of a thing where eventually, obviously the turn came. I ended up teaming with Steve Frost, and then we were going to do a tag match with Steve, and he had a mystery partner, which turned out to be Psycho. It was probably one of the best tags I've ever done. I know that. It was just everything just clicked that night. The timing was right. The crowd was hot. Everything was good. Unfortunately, right at the end of the match, Steve hit Frosty with an elbow, and it's actually knocked all his 4 front teeth loose. It split his gums, and they were sort of hanging almost like on the hinge. And so naturally, we sort of finished the match quickly, and by the time I'd stick around to do a mic spot, by the time we got backstage, there was all this fuss going on, and one of the guys told the promoter that one of the guys was hurt, and the guy who was promoting at the time, he sort of basically went, look, don't worry, the guys can look after him. And that was pretty much it. The guy's like, well, if you don't care about us getting hurt, then we're not working anymore. That's it. And so the show's finished there and then that night. So we never actually got to finish any stories and stuff like that. So it was just, one of those unfortunate sort of things that happened. I mean, that was going back to year 2000. So it's going back a while now. But
Stevens, he still feel bad to this day.
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing. When things happen in the ring, you do. And look, I had one incident. We were working at the Metro, the nightclub in Melbourne, and one of the young blokes, Austin Young, he wanted to bleed, and I mean, it was only I think it was a battle royal or a rumble or something to finish. And I'm like, do you really want to do it in a rumble? He's like, yeah, I've never done it before. He goes, could you do it for me? And I was just like, I said, look, I'm not comfortable doing that, And anyway, he kept asking, kept nagging. I said, all right, here's how we're going to do it. We'll go outside the ring. We'll brawl outside. I'll grab you in a headlock. I'll just do a very, very small cut, and then I'll run you into the ring post, and off we go, right? Yep, okay. So going outside, I've grabbed the headlock, went to start, just as I've gone to cut, he starts pushing towards the ring post. And so we've gone down, and next I've noticed blood was everywhere. And I'm like, oh, shit. And I ended up driving into the hospital. I was 16 stitches out of it. So, so I understand where Steve's coming from. So when you, like, I felt so bad that night. I felt horrible. You feel guilty, you're like this poor kid, because he was only what, 20, 21, whatever he was at the time. But he was actually really good about it. He goes, look, I know it wasn't your fault. You just one of those things that happened. So, it was just but it doesn't stop you feeling guilty. When you do something that you hurt someone. Thankfully, that was probably the only time that I ever really hurt someone in the ring that I know of, anyway. So I'm pretty happy, proud of the fact that I was, I like to think I was safe to work with. And tried to be fairly light to work with everyone. So that was the one time for me, and that haunted me for weeks. So it just felt really bad.
Yeah. These things happen though. That's why I feel now they should emphasise more on not going as fast, because you see like video reels about botch spots all the time. But that's why it's good to sort of work slower and be safer and have psychology that even when you're doing things safely and smartly, you can still get injured.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time. And it could just be as simple as, just bumping the wrong way. It could be a spot you've done 1,000 times. For whatever reason, you take like a backdrop, for example. I've taken hundreds of them over the years, but you might have one where you might just land a little bit off, and it just wins the absolute crap out of you. And so you've got to stall a little bit, till you get your breath back. So you get guys who would nut shot themselves, or so they'd be you'd have to sort of work around it. You'd start arguing with the ref while they got over the pain from hitting themselves in the nuts or whatever it was. So sort of thing. They're just slowing the pace down, and you can work around all that stuff. So
Yeah, you explained it before, so I won't ask you how did you start in professional wrestling? What went into starting out as a wrestler? What were the early days of being a wrestler like? Unless you want to tell us about it.
Yeah, I probably got more. I got interest. It was mainly through my mum that it all came. Like she was a huge wrestling fan. Used to go regularly to Festival Hall back, especially in the 60s, 70s, all around there. She had her own little spot at Festival Hall. It was about 3 or 4 rows back, right on the aisle where the baby faces came out. So when I was probably 3 or 4, she started taking me along as well. Ken was already going every week as well by then. But just, I think back now and how lucky and how privileged I was to see up close and personal, see these guys that, obviously went on to become megastars, so, and they were still big stars then too. But to think that I've got to see guys like Don Morocco when he was young working out here, Rick Martel when he first started out here, and Andre the Giant. I've seen him in person quite a number of times over the years, and remember when I was probably 4 or 5, and he walked past me. I tried to pat Andre on the back, and because he was just so big, I sort of reached up. I just managed to clip the bottom of his hand as he was walking past. So, but to see Andre and Bruiser Brody and these kind of guys, and Harley Race out here as well. I remember the night that Harley Race wrestled Ron Miller for the world title out here. And we were, sitting right up near the front. I mean, that was a pretty cool experience, So, because they did a big build up too, obviously, where Ron would beat him in a non-title match on TV, and then, so it built up the local boy. And look, I think they did a 1 hour Broadway And yeah, but that was, yeah. And it wasn't until, I think it was years later, I actually found out, because back then they used to have flag bearers used to come out and they used to do the national anthem and the whole thing, you know, because it was a big thing. The world title match was, you know, a big deal back then, as it should be. And like my uncle worked as an usher at Festival Hall for a while there, and I think I heard through the family that he was actually, I think, the flag bearer for Ron Miller that night. So yeah, which I didn't know till only a few years ago. So yeah, so I thought that was actually pretty cool. So yeah, so I suppose Mum was the big influence, you know, in us becoming involved and gaining interest in wrestling. So yeah, I think so when Ken started, of course, you know, we'd go all over the place to watch him, and probably the one downside was my mum only ever got to see me work once before she passed, so she wasn't well. She was in hospital at the time, and it was around about her birthday. So we said to the hospital, "Oh, we're taking her out for her birthday." We didn't tell her we were taking her to the wrestling, but yeah. So I was in the opening match that night, and Ken was on the show as well. So he was doing the main, teaming up with Mario. So it was kind of a perfect scenario. So we both worked on the one show. It was the first time we worked on the same show. And the fact that Ken was teaming with Mario Milano, who was one of my mum's all-time favourites, made it even better. So, yeah, look, that was a really special night for me. Yeah, I think I knew that I wouldn't be able to wrestle in front of Mum very often. So, yeah, I went all out that night. I was sort of like a Wayne Starr. And it was only like my fourth match. I think we did just under 30 minutes, and we just really went for it. Yeah, we did everything we could think of that night. So, and yeah, look, I worked my ass off. You know, I wanted to be the best match on the show, and then so yeah, the next day we went and saw her back at the hospital, and she goes, "Oh yeah, yours was by far the best match last night." And so for me, that was probably one of the proudest moments for me. Especially given that Ken was on the show as well. So that kind of that gave me a nice little boost. So it was hard, I suppose, at first, given that Ken had already wrestled for 15 years before I started. So he'd kind of already established himself. He'd been there, done it. And suddenly here comes little brother. So I knew I had a lot to live up to. But at the same time, I knew I was I had a different style to what Ken did. So I suppose that was part of the reasoning with the name change as well. Not wanting to work under the same name. So because back then, they wouldn't have let brothers wrestle each other. So I always wanted to wrestle Ken. So that was a bit of a dream for me. And the first time we did it was up in Sydney. We were doing a shopping centre one week, and then I think we did 3 or 4 days there, and then we did one at Ingleburn. So I'm pretty sure it was like grand final weekend. Anyway, so but yeah, so that was the first time. So we got to do a couple of matches up there, but we'd never actually worked in Melbourne. And we wanted to work with each other in Melbourne, in front of the family and all that down here. So it wasn't until 2000 that we finally got to do that. So we did 2 shows in a row down here, including Ken's last ever match, which was with me. So we did a street fight for his last match, and look, it was really good. That was a real special night for all of us. The the fact that the whole family was there watching it. We had friends that had come over just for that match, and so that was pretty special. To be able to share the ring with him for his last match was that was amazing. That was really good. So yeah.
Awesome stuff. How did you come up with the name Red Hot Ricky Diamond?
I didn't come up with it. Sort of goes back to the mid '80s. Ken was supposed to be doing a series of shows at Festival Hall in Melbourne, and there was talk about they wanted to. It was going to be filmed. It was going to be on TV and Channel 9 and all this sort of stuff was going to start to get involved, and so Ken started thinking about maybe changing his name, and we went over to John Snyder, John Dank. We were over at his house one night, and we were trying to think of all these different names for Ken, and we must have rattled off, probably 100 different names. And anyway, Ken's kind of like, no. The next day, we had to go to my niece's christening, and I was standing out the front, and Big John's rocked up, and he's leaned out the window. He goes, "I've got one," and that's where we came up with Ricky Diamond. And by then Ken's like, "Oh no, look, I think I'll just stick with my own name. I've used my own one for 7 years now." So, and I liked it straight away. And I thought, well, if you're not going to use it, I will. So, and I thought it gave me an opportunity to work with Ken too by not having the same name. So, and then of course a few years after that, because I was only 14 then. John unfortunately passed away a few years later, and so that's really cemented it for me. I'm like, right, no, I'm definitely using it now because I wanted to, not only the fact that I liked the name, but I thought it would be nice. That was sort of my tribute for John. He was a great bloke. He was a good friend of the family's, and I had just so much respect for him. So to be able to use that name and honour him was something special for me. The Red Hot, that sort of came a bit later. We sort of toyed with a few different gimmicks that just didn't work. I think Peter Farry started the whole, girl's best friend shit with the diamond, and then
that's what
just
Steph School said.
Hey?
That's what Steve School said.
Yeah, so it's just one of these these things. Is that girl? Oh, the girls this way. Yeah, the like Steve's talking about there is the music. We did a show in Brunswick, and I was working with Chuck, and it was actually his very first match. And I went to give the guys my music, and they're like, as Big Dom, who was the promoter down here, he's like, "Oh, that's all right. I've got music lined up and whatever." And we'll go, "All right, whatever." Well, Chuck didn't know the protocol. He's walked out with the commentators. Usually the commentators would go out and do a big spiel and all that. But anyway, he's walked out with him. So whatever music played first, I'm behind the curtain, or behind the door. So all I can hear is boom, boom, boom. It wasn't until I walked out that I realised what they were playing. It was the girls just want to have fun, shit. And I was just like mortified when the first call walked out there, and I was really, really pissed off actually when I first came out, because I thought, but it just happened to be a time where Channel 9 were there filming us for the Wide World of Sport special. So it's just one of those things that, of course, stuck. So probably the irony is that that's probably not the worst one that ever happened to me. So I had one that was even worse up in Sydney. I gave the guy my tape back then. That's showing the age now. So I gave him the tape with the music on it, and we're supposed to play. I think it was TNT or something like that. And he must have wound the tape or forwarded it to the first song on the other side of the tape. And so I'm waiting to come out, and what was the song? It was bloody Celine Dion song. It was it's all coming back to me now or some shit like that. And I think Ken was ring announcing, and I looked through the curtain. I'm like, I'm not coming out to this shit. And Ken's, pissing himself, laughing. He's like, no, you've got to come out. You've got to do the mash. So I just got out and got in the ring as quick as I could. And but yeah, that one was pretty bad. So the whole girls just want to have fun. And that actually, wasn't so bad when I look back at it. But I stuffed around with a few different songs, and finally, when I settled on the Red Hot gimmick, I started using Hot Stuff. So I've been using that one now since 1999. so pretty much been the same.
Nice. Stephen Cool asked this before. Tell the story about the SA trip.
Oh, we had some good fun over there. I used to love working in Adelaide, especially being a Victorian. I was working heel over there, and first couple of shows I did over there, Steve come over with me, and we did one. We teamed up one night. We were doing the Theberton Theatre, and it was really good. I think there was about 7 of us from Victoria went over for it, because there's 4 of us went for the tag. Yeah, the girls came over, Sherry Sinatra and Donna Marie both came over, and one of our referees came over. And we were doing the tag. It was at Theberton Theatre, and we've come out, obviously. We thought, we'll be the heels this time, because normally we were faces everywhere, so we'll be heels over there. And we've come out. We had the Victoria. I gave him a Victorian footy jumper, and I had the Collingwood jumper on, and under our jackets, because Collingwood had just beaten the Adelaide Crows that week, so it was perfect timing. So naturally, they wanted to kill us straight away, so it was fantastic. It was. Me and Frost decided to brawl through the crowd and left Steve with Headmaster back in the ring. We brawled all the way up through all the way up into the Royal Box. It was great. So, that was an interesting trip. It was, it was funny. Backstage, you could pick the difference. They were all young kids over there, so they were going through all their stuff, and they're trying to work out their matches. And there was us, sitting in the corner, just laughing and having a bit of fun and just joking around and stuff like that. So, and they're sort of looking at us like mortified, aren't you guys going to get ready? And we're like, yeah, we're ready. We're good. We know what we're doing. So, it was good to see these kids. But I had a guy wait for me after the show that night. I remember that. It was probably the only time anyone's actually done that. It was I jumped over the rails. We'd just been brawling through the crowd, and he got up in my face. So I sort of just kicked at the rails, just told him to sit down, and that was it. He was waiting for me after the show. He was waiting out in the car park. So, but we've come out through a different door and jumped in the car and just left. He was still standing there waiting. So, I wasn't. One of those times I wasn't too worried. I mean, look, there was 7 or 8 of us walked out together, so I felt pretty safe anyway. But that was probably the only time. Although Adelaide's one of those towns where I used to love stirring them up. And being a Victorian in South Australia, it was pretty easy to stir them up. So. I've had people try and jump the rails at me. I've been spat on over there. You walk up the aisle and you just feel spit all over your back. And first match I did over there, the whole crowd were throwing Coke bottles in the ring at me after the match. So, and so that was probably the reason the promoter kept bringing me back. I used to just get so much heat there. So actually, it was getting to the point where I was getting so much heat. She asked me to commentate the first half of the show one day, just to have me out there. So yeah, it was great. I used to just go over and find out what was going on locally, and go buy a copy of the local paper, and find out what was going on, and just just used to run wild and go give them heaps. That was good fun. But I stopped doing a lot of the travelling not long after my son was born. So I pretty much stayed in Victoria after he was about 6 months old. So, but I missed that side of it. I loved the travelling and the road trips. The road trips were the best. Always were the best. So yeah.
Awesome. Any funny stories from being on the road?
Look, there's a it always depends on who you're traveling with too. Some really funny guys. I know me and Chuck travelled a fair bit. Did a lot of Sydney shows together. So we used to work we'd do Melbourne on the Saturday night, jump in the car, drive to Sydney, do Sydney Sunday afternoon, then drive straight back and go straight to work on Monday. And I did that probably twice a month for about 14, 15 months. And if I wasn't in my 20s, it probably would have killed me. But there was one time I think me and Chuck went up and we were a bit tired. We'd been, we'd just done a show. And we got to about Albury or wherever it was, and so I'll get a pack of the no-dos, and we decided, we had the whole pack. So we were driving along, and it was just, we were just off our tree with this no-dos, and got to the point where we were just like driving along, and we were laughing and giggling, and we just couldn't stop for about an hour. And then eventually we crashed big time, and we had to pull over into some little truck stop and just had to sleep in the car, because he had his girlfriend with us too. So the three of us trying to sleep in the car at 3 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't much fun. But we had some of the guys were pretty good to travel with. Especially wherever when we did the train rides when we used to do Adelaide, we used to go over on the train, and so that was always a bit of fun, because you get on the train would pull out about 9 o'clock, the bar would open at 10, so we'd straight up to the bar, and you only had like a 2 or 3 hour window where the bar was open, so we'd just go and drink as much as we possibly could. We had one night, there was a few of us on there. I think me and Chuck again went up to the bar, and within about 20 minutes we had a round table, chocolate block full of beer. We found some guy who had a deck of cards. We ended up having about 3 or 4 of us there sitting playing cards till God knows what time in the morning, with the table full of beer ready to go. So, but when we arrived like 7 o'clock the next morning, we were a little bit ordinary. So
Nice.
So we did have some fun on the road, and it was more for me. It was more just catching up with guys and getting to know them out away from the ring as well. It was really good doing that kind of stuff, just talking and all that. So that Lush, look, Screaming Lord Lush, who we lost 9 years ago now. He came on a trip with us once, and he was a big help for me that trip. I was going through some personal issues at the time, and he was a real rock for me that trip. But at the same time, he was one of the funniest guys you'd ever meet. Just naturally a very funny guy. And so we had 4 or 5 of us in the car, and he was just the whole trip. He just didn't switch off. But I know when we got to do the show, I was probably still a bit stressed over a few things that were going on, and as you do when you're a bit younger. And he was the one who sort of pulled me aside and just calm me down and talk to me, and he was a real saving grace to me that trip. But yeah, and he just that, and the fact that he kept everything light was really good. So but yeah, he had to sort of take the reins. But no, he's just one of those really great blokes that you loved having around. And I was kind of lucky, like when we go back to, was it 98, I think 99, somewhere around there. I had this idea of forming a group. We named it the Cult. So we thought it was around that. Huh?
I said, great band.
So yeah, but we at the time, like it was around that time in the sort of late 90s where that was kind of the thing. You had the NWO, DX was just starting up and all this sort of stuff. So I thought, shit, we haven't got anything like that here. And so we started up one. There was me, there was Amy Action, Bulldog O'Reilly, Cobra, and then Lush came in kind of at the last minute. He sort of turned up at one of the shows, and one of the other guys who we were going to put in didn't show. So I said, well, look, do you want to do the part? Do you want to take the play? And he jumped at the chance. So and that was probably where he really launched. That's where he changed his whole character to screaming Lord Lush, and that was probably his career took off after that. So there were the five of us. So you had I was kind of like the mouthpiece, and then Lush became the other mouthpiece. So we were kind of like the tag team of the group, and then you had Cobra, who was the lightweight, and Bulldog, who was the heavyweight, and Amy, who was the women's contender. And so it worked really well, and we just used to like go out and interrupt and interfere with people's matches and just be just general pains in the ass. So, but it was good fun. We had a lot of fun with it. It was really good. So, and then
That's what Steve also.
Animal. Yeah, I'm not going into that one, Steve. No. But But the Colt was something that we had a lot of fun with. And we ran with that for probably a bit under a year, I think. And then eventually they did the turn against me, and that was when I actually changed the name to Red Hot then. So it all sort of synced in well. So it's like I came back as a face with this whole new gimmick. So yeah, worked out well.
Awesome. Josh March is there and growing. Can't pronounce his last name. Herb Street Stories.
Roland, Roland's a pretty classy guy. Like he was a good guy to work with and a good guy to work for. We used to hang out a bit when he was younger. And of course, I remember when I think when WCW came out here and they did Nitro at Rod Labour back in the early 2000s, I think it was. And there was about 8 of us. Rowan was sort of one, and we sort of had the idea of let's all rock up in a limo. So we've all hired the limo, and so we met at Rowan's place. So he sort of helped organise all that, and it was really good because we've sort of done a couple of laps of Rod Labour at first. So everyone thinks it's them turning up. We're sort of got the hands out the windows and the whole shit. And we've actually pulled up right at the bottom of the steps. So naturally, people were sort of all looking over. Oh, who is it? And then us bums got out, and they're all kind of like, oh. Look, Rowan was a good guy. I don't know too many really funny stories about him, but he was just always gotten on well with him. Always found him great guy to talk to, really easy to get on with. Whether it was worker or backstage, as a promoter, he was always good, always willing to sit and just sort of listen and all that. So and I suppose he was still fairly new in the business himself at the time. So and then I know He was involved with Cuppa at the Corner Hotel. I'm not sure if it was Wrestle Rock or one of the ones before that. I can't remember, but I know he was kind of
Wrestle Rock, and then there was All Star, wasn't there?
Yeah, Rowan did All Star, which was at Crown. They were great shows. They were really good shows. Loved every minute of them. They were really good fun to do. From memory, I think they were on a Sunday afternoon. I think so. So it was really good because they didn't clash with any other shows around too. So it was really good. So you had everyone available. So yeah, so that made it even better. So and that's the thing too with and that was a sign of the times with the promoters, is that a lot of them and in that time did work together. They all worked in sync with each other, and I think that's why we used to get really good crowds every week. Like we were doing tiny little halls, but we were getting 500, 700, sometimes over 1,000 in these little tiny little halls. Whereas nowadays you're lucky to get 200. But that was all because the promoters would work in with each other, and they'd promote each other, and it was great, especially that late 80s, late 90s to early 2000s. It was you had 4 or 5 promoters around. They all sat down with each other, and one, they just said, "Look, I'll do the first Saturday of the month, and I'll do the second, I'll do the third," and then you had like Yakovides, who was doing the rock and roll wrestling. He's like, "Well, I'll do Friday nights," and so that way no one's shows clashed, and they were all pretty much the same crew working with each show. So. Even though they had their own stories, but if you were a face in one, you were a face at the other, or heel, whichever one you were. But it was great. We could go and work with Jim Demiroff up in Epping on one weekend, and then all night they'd be promoting, "Hey, look, if you want to see these guys next week out in like Glen Waverley, that's where they'll be next week, and then the week after they'll be in Keilor, and then Essendon." And so it was really good. So people would follow it. And so as a result, we've got really good crowds every week. So everyone just put their egos in their back pocket, whereas I think nowadays the promoters are very much us against them. It's you're with us, or you don't work for that group, and it's never going to work. You're going to get the occasional good shows, you're going to get the occasional good crowds, but unless they work together, it's not going to work. And that's the thing. We're not big enough to be able to do that. It's not like one promoter's got Channel 7 and the other one's got Channel 9. Then it's different. Then we want you to be exclusive. But as long as the guys are just out there doing it for pocket money and petrol money and sometimes no money, you can't expect them to be 100% loyal. So I only ever had one promoter say to me one time, "Look, I want you to work exclusively for us." And I said, "Well, that's fine. You give me, say, $1,000 a week, whether I work or not, and I'll think about it." And he was just, "No." Well, then if we're doing it for $50 or whatever it is, then I'm going to work wherever I can. I'm happy to work for you, but I'm not going to just be exclusive to you. I'm not going to do one show a month when I could do a show every weekend. So, another thing, we weren't big enough. We weren't earning big money. We never were, and I don't think we ever will, really. Not in Australia, anyway. So there's only a couple of promotions in the world who earn that kind of money. So, and obviously WWE and AEW and all that, but we'll never be. I don't think we'll ever be at that sort of level because it's just not big enough here.
Yeah, I think Australian wrestling, like in the World Championship Wrestling, it was pretty good, but then we've looked like we're going to do well, and then we've fallen short. So I'm not sure. With like things, and also the click stuff in Australia.
Yeah,
we've had like a bit of click culture, and like you were saying,
Yeah.
You got to stick with my clique. You can't work with them and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, yeah, we just wrestling goes through different phases and different eras and stuff anyway. Different forms of popularity. You know, you look back to those 60s and 70s, it was on TV and everyone knew who everyone was. You had packed houses everywhere. You know, they were really, you know, big, good times, but that was a different era too. The fans were different then. You know, back then the fans believed, you know, and then you had that sort of 80s and early 90s where there was that whole, oh, is it or isn't it real? Yeah, fans sort of didn't know, but they still went anyway because they, you know, it was liked it and it was entertaining. And then you got sort of late 90s, early 2000s where the fans got a bit smarter towards the business, but didn't care anyway because it was just like, well, you know, we still like it anyway, so who cares? And now it's different again. The fans basically control everything that happens. You know, so they have probably more say than some of the wrestlers do. So if the fans don't like you nowadays, then yeah, bad luck. You're not going to get anywhere. So yeah, I mean, you haven't, yeah, when you get things like it's all about who gets what chance and stuff like this now. It's like, well, yeah, I'd rather the crowd just sort of, you know, gasp or yell or scream or whatever, you know, over a big move or something. But look, that's just sign of the times. Things move, things change. Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of the product these days. But yeah, but look, yeah, I still obviously have a lot of respect for what they do because I've been there too. So I know how hard it is on the body. I know how much they put in. I know how much time they put in. Yeah, and I suppose they've got a lot more to learn than we had. You know, in the sense that I said they've got to. Yeah, they're told what to do, what to say, how long they can talk. Yeah. So, whereas, yeah, we kind of just winged it. So, yeah.
Yeah, my mate asked this earlier. Does he have a highlight he remembers during his career?
Highlights. Look, I suppose there's a few. Like, you know, obviously your first match is always one. My first match was at the Stardust nightclub in Fitzroy. It was on a Monday night. We used to do shows on a Monday a lot back then. And yeah, so obviously that was a big memorable night for me. But I just remember being so nervous, even though, you know, I'd done it so many times, you know, at training and whatever. So, but yeah, there was a guy there from South Australia on the show, and John Buckley, his name was, and he came up and spoke to me before and just really calmed me down. It was the only time we ever met, but yeah, I'll never forget what he did for me that night. So your first match was a big highlight, of course. The night I was talking about earlier, when my mum came down, that was a really big one for me. Your first title is always a big one. For me, that was in Bass Hill Plaza up in Sydney. You know, where I teamed up with Ken and we won the tag titles. So that was a really special moment for us because that was only about 6 months, I think, after Mum had passed away. So the fact that we got to team up and get the belts, that was really special, I know, for both of us that day. So yeah, some of the hardcore stuff that I did, especially early on. Yeah, some of the matches I did with like Cuppa. We did one at Epping, which was, yeah, a big favourite match of mine. It was just one of those nights where everything went well. I did another one. There was street fight match I did with Psycho at the Calabria Club. That to me is probably still one of my favourite matches, mainly because we had such a big build up to it. The match built up for probably about 7 or 8 months before we finally did it. So that night, I think the crowd were just up for it. They'd been waiting so long for this match that they were up from the time we walked out to the time we left. And I remember because we did a 30-minute Broadway, and we actually approached them about being able to do a 45-minute Broadway. And they're like, oh, no, you guys, you won't keep the crowd interested for 45 minutes. And so we're like, well, we think we can. And but they said, no, you keep it to 30. So we got to 30 minutes. The first thing the crowd started was 5 more minutes chant. They wanted more, and they actually ended up giving us a standing ovation after the match. So that was an experience in itself. So that to actually have that respect from the crowd for the match that we'd just done. That was huge for us, especially in that era, late 90s. So but yeah, like we worked so hard. I just remember we came backstage and we just hugged each other and we're like, couldn't keep them interested, hey? So then the main event went out and the crowd was just dead because that's not what the match they came to see. So that was a good night for us. Good little ego boost too, I suppose. But the fact that we could go out and I think we got a lot more respect from a lot of the older promoters that night, or the older wrestlers that night, because we were both still fairly young. I mean, I'd been wrestling for 5 years or so at that time, and then you had like Psycho, he'd only been in his maybe second or third year at that time, so that was kind of a bit of a coming out. After that, we both started to get a much bigger push after that night. And I think that was the night we really earned our stripes and earned our respect from the older crew. So so that was a really good highlight. So yeah.
I'll ask you, this is what Josh Mars asked before. Wrong one, sorry. Favorite looking title you held?
Favorite looking title? Favorite looking title? We had the was it the old koala belt, which became the hardcore belt, and so I sort of just put a bit of foil or tin over the top of it, and to put the name, the hardcore belt on it. That was a bit of fun. That was probably that one, and the Victorian title. I think that was I suppose that was my first single belt was the Victorian light heavyweight. So that was I like that thing. I was pretty skinny back then, so it was actually a bit too big for me. So I used to just have to carry it out because it used to fall off my waist. So I had to carry that one over the shoulder most of the time. And then you had what else? The Commonwealth belt was that was a really nice looking belt. So I'm not sure what happened with that or where that is now, but I really like that one. That was probably one of the favourite ones.
Josh Mars also asked, your thoughts on high risk championship?
High risk. That was they're the ones that came out here.
Yeah, you might be talking about high risk championship wrestling.
Yeah, I didn't really follow it, to be honest. So I don't really have a lot to say, to be honest. Outside of probably the main ones, I didn't really watch a lot of other stuff. High risk. I do remember the name. I just can't remember too much about them, to be honest.
Yeah, I discussed it with your brother and a few other people like Peter Barry. They were a company Mark Willen tried to start. They had like a few shows on 10 or 9, but apparently it was fully organised. But they had a bit of buzz behind them.
No, I do sort of vaguely remember that now. That was probably before I started, so I didn't really have much of an insight on that one. But yeah, I do remember that, and they had that Warrior ripoff and
High risk warrior.
a few other ones. Yeah, and it's just like it was just really cringeworthy. I like, nah, I can't watch this. So no, I didn't even go to that one. I went to some of the Wrestle Riot ones earlier on. But they were good shows because I think you had like a lot of ex-WWE guys at the time. So, the guys when you had like guys like Bossman and Hawk and Smash and Neidhart and Jake Roberts and Morocco and Junkyard Dog. And so they were pretty good shows especially for the ones who loved a bit of nostalgia. I got to briefly meet Junkyard Dog. When he was out, so it seemed pretty cool. I know we got a photo together, and I never got to see it because unfortunately my camera got stolen, so I never got to see the photos. So yeah, that was very.
Yeah, Peter just said the sound's breaking up, so I'm not sure what that point of your end.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing some of your comments at the moment. So,
okay.
Not really sure which end it's at. I don't know. Is that any better?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you better now.
Yeah. Yeah, it could have been how I was holding my phone as well, because sometimes my phone goes funny.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask you. I'll go back up. There's a few things I've skimmed back and forth. So I'm just sort of like a match thing, like where things go. Thoughts on the overall landscape in Australian wrestling in the past, and thoughts on the overall landscape in Australian wrestling in the present.
In the past, it was always it was obviously very different because just to be involved, you had to sort of know someone who knew someone. So you had and you used to get tested and pushed when you first came in to see if you would actually stick around. And so, given that it was a bit more old school, you were expected to work a bit more stiff and a bit harder and a bit more solid. Whereas nowadays, it's pretty easy to get into. It's just, look, there's schools everywhere. And I think the trouble is nowadays, it's very much a crash course. I know I had my own training school for 4 years. And I wouldn't, or 5 years actually. When I was training guys, I wouldn't get them booked on shows until I knew they were 100% ready. And look, some guys would pick it up and be ready in 4, 5, maybe 6 months, and they were good students. Others, might take a bit longer. It might take 8 or 9 months. Sometimes it might take a year before they're actually ready to be in the ring. Whereas I find nowadays it's really like a 6-week crash course, and they're in there. Yeah, and so they've still got a lot to learn, and that it's not just about taking bumps and doing moves. It's about protecting each other, looking after each other in the ring. And that's something that's maybe gone out of it a bit more now. you get guys who have been around for a while. They know when something's botched, and you can see them covering it up. But if I made a mistake with a young kid, he wouldn't know what to do. He wouldn't know how to cover it up for me. He wouldn't know how to catch me in order to protect me or whatever. Whereas I know back with the older times, there's no way you would be let loose on the ring until you were 100% ready. And that was always, determined by guys who were not only training, but guys who were already in the business. So they think, oh yeah, this guy will be good. He'll be good. He'll be ready. He looks safe. We'll give him a chance. Like I said, I just, I mean, to be honest, I'm probably a little bit out of the loop nowadays as well. I live in country Victoria now, so I'm probably a couple of hours out of the CBD. So I'm kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I'm probably not around the local scene much now. So it's probably not the best one to ask on insights, but I know for a while there that they were sort of going, some of the promoters were coming in, they just wanted to get talent out there. So they were training guys up quickly. And one thing that I didn't like back then was you had guys who were coming to the business and they'd have a strap within 6 months. Whereas I know with us, you were pretty much on job duty for the first 2 years of your career. It wasn't till you earned your stripes and earned your respect that you finally got a push, and that's the way it was. So you actually appreciated it when you finally did get that push. Whereas if the guys get pushed too quick and too early in their career, and I've seen it firsthand, they start to believe their own publicity. They start to really think, hey, I am the champ. I'm the one they come to see. I'm the main event. I'm this, I am that. And it's like, you're only as good as the guy you're working with. So at the end of the day, you're just there to do a show. It doesn't matter who wins or loses. No one gives a shit who wins or loses. You can go out and lose a match and still look $1 million. So it doesn't really matter. But look,
That's what Peter Barry just said.
Yeah, and look, that was the thing. Like for me, it was never about who was going over. You'd get there and you're like, who's going over tonight? And, he is. Okay, cool. How do we? Let's do this finish. So, the first thing, you want to look good. You make them look good. It doesn't make any difference. You can still walk out of there. Yeah. Like if I'm the baby face, or if I'm working with you, if you're the heel and you're going over, then I will make you look like an absolute monster. But at the same time, I want you to make it look like I almost beat that monster. You know what I mean? And or that you had to cheat in order to get out of it, to get away with it or whatever. So, either way, you get your hand raised, I walk out with respect. No one loses anything. There was no squash matches. And I know if you go back even further, like back in the sort of 60s and 70s, you only got to go watch those matches now. You could generally pick who was going over because the one who was doing the job would be on top of the match for probably 70% of the match. And that way both guys got to look really good. So that was the theory back then. It's all sort of changed a bit now. Half the time, if you watch the matches now and turn the volume off without listening to the commentary, without listening to the crowd, most times you couldn't pick who the face or the heel was. That's the big difference. And that was another thing I used to tell the students is actually watch shows without volume and try and pick who the faces and heels are. You go back and you watch stuff with, like Ric Flair back in the 80s or whatever. You always knew whether he was a face or a heel, or who, which one, who he was working with. So, But that sort of goes back to another good time in my life too was being a trainer. That was probably one of, actually talking about highlights, that was probably one of the biggest highlights for me as well. So I had my own school there for a while. We were based in a little gymnasium in Richmond, just up behind the corner hotel there. And a lot of the guys started to dub it the Diamond Dungeon, even though it was upstairs. But it was good fun. We had probably 40 or 50 guys over the years that came through. Some didn't last that long. Some are still going. There's a couple of them I think are still going. Like 20 odd years later. But some of them did pretty well in the business, and some didn't. But that's the nature of it. So, but look, I loved all that, and one of the reasons I wanted to have a training school was, mainly because I think I got to learn from all these amazing guys over the years. I had all this information pumped into me from guys who were back in the World Championship Wrestling days. So I used to pick their brains a lot when I was a kid, and I thought, well, what's the point of having all this knowledge and just keeping it all to myself? Why not share it with other people who want to, they have the same dream of wanting to be a wrestler? So, my theory was that anyone who came in, that was it. That was my job, to get them there, whether it took 6 months or 18 months. I wanted them to achieve that dream of being a wrestler. Whether they stuck around for 20 years or 2 years, that was kind of up to them. But my job was to get them there. And that was a really good thing. I loved all that, and I loved the challenge. And the other thing too was that I really wanted to train women as well, because when I started out, there weren't many women. You'd only ever get maybe 2 or 3 women at one time, and that was it. You had Sherry Sinatra, who was probably your mainstay, but then she'd hardly ever had girls to work with. When they used to come in, they never stuck around for long because, unfortunately, back then it was a very chauvinistic business. It was very sleazy as well. So the girls would come in and guys would just sleaze all over them. So they didn't want to stick around. They didn't want to be part of that environment. So I wanted a place where I could train girls and knowing that they could feel safe. So I had a few that started to come down, and I pulled all the guys together one night and said, look, if I catch any of you being sleazy or doing anything, you're out of here. Simple. They want to learn just like you do. So so that was one thing that really drove me as well. And once we started getting 1 or 2 girls, we ended up getting a few through the system, and it was good that some of them went on to work. And I had enough at one point where I only had probably maybe half a dozen, and there was a few girls who were already working. And I remember approaching Sam Rossi, who was promoting at the time. He was doing shows out in Keilor. I said, look, I don't think a women's battle royal has ever been done. Not in Australia anyway. At that point, I don't think anyone had ever done it before because there just wasn't enough girls around. I said, look, I've got a few that are training. Some, a lot of them aren't quite ready yet, but they could do a fill-in spot for a battle royal. How would you feel? And he's like, well, let's do it. So that was in December 2000. We did it. I think we had, I can't remember if it was 8 or 10 girls now, and that's all it was, and that's probably all we needed just to, and it was really good. We had the experienced girls who were in there, till the end, of course, and you had your other girls who were just there to make up numbers. And but that was one of the things I was most proud of, actually, being able to organise that. The fact that it was the first, so that was pretty proud moment. I ended up doing another one a few years after that. So look, it was really good times. I loved all that that period of my life, and it was good because like I said, promoters were really tight back then. They all worked with each other. So if I had guys or girls who were ready, I would ring them and say, look, I've got a kid here. He's doing really well. Can we give him a chance? And we'd put him with someone who was experienced that would look after him. And that's how they'd get their break. Or we'd put them in battle royals just to get a feel of being in front of a crowd or whatever. So that was really, I loved it. And but unfortunately, that kind of stopped when some of the newer promotions came in, and they kind of started with this whole us against them sort of mentality, and it's like, and so, and then they wanted to start training their own people and all this sort of thing. And so that's kind of when I sort of put my arms up and said, no, enough, no more. So. I kind of finished suddenly, unfortunately, but it was a really good part, and it helped me a lot as a worker as well. Especially when the students would come and watch the shows, because then the pressure was really on. I knew I had to perform. So so that was really good fun, good time. I'm trying to think what else I had to.
Joel White on Blazers Pro Wrestling fan group was giving you praise. He also, I think that's like referee work. He runs his own group where he goes into the history of Victorian wrestling. You familiar with Joel White?
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, he came in and started training at first, and then decided he was going to referee. But he came down and trained with us every week. His wife came down and trained as well. She actually had a few matches over the years too. And look, it was good actually, because he obviously got plenty of he got plenty of work, and out of that, and especially guys down at training, we would put matches on at training all the time. So it gave him a lot of refereeing experience too before he even started. So I suppose the art of refereeing that's a tough gig. I've only have done it a couple of times, but it's bloody hard. Because you're trying not to see everything, and that's the real key to being a referee, especially if you're doing a tag. Knowing when to look, when not to look, when to stall, when to So they're such a vital and such an important part of the match. And Joel went on to be one of the better referees we had. Because like obviously when I started, we had Tony Marino and Vic Ferrari, who were both absolutely brilliant referees. But as they sort of started to phase out, we had a new era. So Joel was one of those really good, consistent referees. We had a young fella, Nick Callis, who was really good as well. And George Demeroff was good, but he was a good referee. But the trouble is he was like 6'3" or 4", so he sort of towered over half the wrestlers. So as good as he was, it sort of looked a bit funny when he was doing matches with some of us lighter blokes. So there's some good ones around. But to find the really good ones, that's really hard. Michael Michaels. I don't think I saw much of Michael, but from what I remember, he was actually quite good too. So I think I might have only done 1 or 2 matches with him, I think. But there were some good ones. There were some average ones. Some that used to see too much. Look. As far as refs, Sydney, I think, had a couple of really good ones as well. There was one up there, Big Al, who was, only a tiny little bloke, but obviously looked the part of a referee. He was quite good. I enjoyed working with him anyway.
Referees pretty much the third worker in the ring. From what I understand, like you got the wrestlers that work, the referee has a part of keeping the match together where you get a good referee. They can actually help, like if the match needs to come to a finish, and just making the two wrestlers look good by how they can sell it. They're really good. Like you need like a good referee.
Yeah, look, absolutely, and they become really important when you need to communicate too. So, but also you get some of these guys as the referee, and there are times where we'd only have one referee for the whole show, and so they might have to do 4 matches in a row before intermission, and they didn't get to come backstage, so they had to know every finish for every match beforehand. Yeah, so they had to go out there and remember every match. And then they'd have a break. Then they'd go out and do maybe the last 2 matches in a row as well. So they didn't have that luxury of coming backstage. And whereas a lot of times, if you had 2 referees, it was all right. They could alternate and they could sit and talk with the guys, and they knew what was going on and when you give them a little bit of a signal for maybe when the finish was coming or when we were about to take the match home. You'd give them a little bit of a signal or whatever, and they knew when we were about to finish. So, but yeah, geez, it was really tough for some of them that had to go out and do basically a whole show and remember everything for each match. Especially if there was times where they had to be involved in the finish or had to take a bump or whatever. So they'd have to remember that the whole time. So if you had a good referee, it makes a big difference. But if you had an inexperienced referee trying to remember everything, it's very easy for them to get lost. So they'd probably need as much training as what the wrestlers do.
What interesting. Talking about training, when I was speaking of Dazzler Dunlop, he was saying about the old school training is you learn how to bump properly, then you learn the holds. Is that how you learn, or would you agree on that? Or
and that's how I taught too. Like it was break falls. There's no point learning anything if you don't know how to fall. You can't learn anything. So we'll do falls, and then we'll just do your basic stuff. So high spots and stuff like that, you can learn in 2 minutes, honestly. Once you know what you're doing, once you've got a basic idea, then you know how it all works. You know how to lead into moves. You know where to stand, how to be balanced. You learn all that stuff first. Then you can go on and do all these bigger spots and stuff like that. So, a few times you'd have young kids, blokes come down and they're, I want to show you what I can do. And it's like, no, just just learn the basics first. Because I figure when you can learn to do 20 minutes at training non-stop without doing one high spot, then you're pretty much ready to go and do a match, because you can throw the high spots in later, but you've got to have something to fall back on. You've got to have your basic stuff to fall back on. Otherwise, it's just no point. So it's no good. Yep.
My understanding, like this is what I was told when I was younger, and you'd think like wrestlers should know it nowadays. Sometimes I question with like just the spots they do for all the fast pace, but I was always told the basics are the foundations of the match, and then when you get your basics sorted, you speed up the moves, but you got the basics to work with, and so it's like speed it up, but you know how to work the spots. But I think nowadays it's questionable because you see like a lot of people botch the moves all the time.
Yeah, because they're trying too much. I think that's the problem. They try and do too much in one match now. And they don't really worry about the story and the selling and all that as much as they used to. And like I can get it in a way. Like I know you've only got 8 minutes, so all right, let's do what we can in 8 minutes. I think for us, we had 15, 20, 30 minutes, something whatever it was. So you knew you could have a rest. You could go hard, do 2 or 3 quick moves, and then go back and have a rest. Grab a headlock, grab an armbar, go back to it, keep going back to the armbar, because then you're telling a story. Bang, bang, 2 or 3 quick moves, bang, straight back into the armbar again. You're wearing him down, So that's all. Just probably a bit of a lost art, I suppose, nowadays. But yeah, look, I think the whole psychology has changed. But a lot of that comes with the changing of the fans too. Yeah, so the fans are obviously much smarter nowadays, and I think the internet probably changed all that anyway. As soon as the internet came in, everything got exposed, and so it kind of took some of the fun out of it, I guess, for us. It's like, well, they know what I'm doing now, and it's not as much fun. It's like going to a magic show and already knowing what the tricks are and knowing how they do it. So it takes the fun out of it. So yeah,
I think a lot of modern day fans, like you got people that are fans and have passion, obviously, but there's so many like marks nowadays that are more interested in criticising, even if it's a good match. So you got like your Dave Meltzer types, and I think that's
yeah. It's just so easy to be an armchair expert nowadays. You didn't have that in our day because they'd had to tell you face to face. If they told you face to face, they'd probably get a punch in the nose. So it's easy now. They can sit behind a computer desk and insult people and call them names and you were crap. You did this, you did that. It's very easy because you don't have to stand in front of me and say it. You know what I mean? So if you had to stand in front of me, you wouldn't say that. You know what I mean? So that's like probably one of the downsides, isn't it, with the internet now? There's too many people out there who it's just too easy for them to be critical and insult people. And it's not just wrestling; it happens all over. People trolling every bloody thing now. Doesn't matter what you do. So there's some people just take pleasure in just trying to stir up trouble and. So I tend to try and steer clear of a lot of that crap now. I don't bother with it. I don't read a lot of the comments and stuff like that anymore. But so be constructive or just shut up. Simple.
Yeah, I prefer the pod if I think it's constructive, but I sort of think people nowadays just like to bully through the internet, and there's like criticism but not critiquing. I do believe in heat, and I do believe in drawing interest and getting a reaction and stirring the pot that way, but I think some people become more like, I just want to be critical of things so they can draw attention to themselves, and it's just coming from like an arsehole perspective.
Some people just have no lives, and that's all it is to it. They're not out there making anything of their own life, so it's easier just to sit and criticise others. It doesn't matter what you do, and you get that across the board. Wrestling, AFL, NRL, makes no difference. There's always going to be people who will insult or rubbish players or athletes or whatever. It's like, well, get out and do it yourself then. So I was always taught, don't criticise people for things you can't do yourself. So if you can come out and do a better job, well, then go ahead and do it. But don't criticise me for something that I can or can't do. So that's just my go on it. But
That's pretty fair. I'll ask you, what goes into promoting yourself as a wrestler? What advice would you give to someone looking to become a wrestler?
So I missed the start of that. It was just broke up a bit. But is that what do you say to someone wanting to start? Is that what you?
What goes into promoting yourself as a wrestler? What advice would you give? Promoting yourself.
Well, it just comes down to hard work. That's that simple. Once you get your foot in the door, it's up to you. If you've got a good work ethic and you turn up, and if someone books you and you turn up all the time, then you'll keep getting bookings. If some guys get a reputation of like not being reliable, or they don't turn up, or they've got last minute they'll pull out on shows, and so a lot of promoters stop using them. So I think once you get your foot in the door, it's then up to you. And then once you get out in front of the crowd, you've got to work hard. It doesn't matter whether you're going over or not. If you can work hard and keep the crowd interested and do all those things, yeah, and work. If the guy you're working with, if you first start out and the guy you're working with comes back to the promoter and says, "Hey, that kid's really good. I like the way he did this and this and this," then they'll book you again. But if you go out and botch everything and work stiff and punch the guy in the nose and all this kind of stuff, and when you first start, well, you're not going to get a very good reputation, and you're not going to get far at all. So, look, it's just it's one of those things. You just got to take your opportunities when they're there and grab them and go for
it. What does the promoter look for from a potential wrestler booking wise? And what is your ideal wrestler you would work in the ring?
The ideal guys to work with, probably. I suppose it's always good when you work with guys who are maybe similar style or similar size. I think that's where probably guys like I said, with Psycho, for example, we're very similar size and similar agility, and but we had similar mentalities too. So we both had that old school mentality. We could both, didn't matter. Like, we've both worked face and we've both worked heel. It was always just about putting each other over, working hard to put each other over. So if the ideal guys are guys who are like that, who they want to make you look good, because by making you look good, they're making themselves look good. You know what I mean? So if I'm say a heel, right, I want that baby face to look $1 million. Like I want them to make it look like, hey, I have to get dirty, I have to be cheating, I have to be doing all this stuff just to get on top of him, right? So, and you'll do all that stuff. Then so if when he comes back, he looks fantastic. The crowd go off their tree, and everyone's happy. So, to me, they're the kind of guys I like to work with. I've worked with a lot of guys who just had no idea and really shouldn't have been out there. A lot of guys would be out there because they look good. They're like bodybuilders or whatever, and then you get them in the ring and you're like, oh my God, these guys got no idea. He can't read what's going on. So I prefer to I liked working with the experienced guys too, mainly because of that very thing. They knew when to slow things down, they knew when to speed things up, they knew if something was going wrong or whatever. So it's all about being comfortable with who you're working with. So anyway.
Any unsung heroes within professional wrestling you'd like to give a shout out to?
Unsung heroes, like in Australia or anywhere?
Australian wrestling.
Geez, look. It's been a while. I've sort of been a bit out of the game for the last 8 years or so. Look, I suppose when you look at the whole package, it's not just the wrestlers themselves, like the referees, they're always unsung heroes. They play such a big role. Our commentators make so much difference on the show. You get really good commentators who can really put the guys over just with things that they're saying. Geez, that makes a world of difference. So we were so lucky. We had Peter Farry and Gene Gatto, who just absolutely bounced off each other so well. They really did. And it made our job so much easier because we could hear them while we were working, and they're talking about, they're actually explaining to the crowd why we're doing certain things that we're doing in the ring and what moves and how, if I had an arm bar on, and they're explaining to the crowd, this is what the move actually does. It actually does this and this. And the fact that they bounced off each other really well. I mean, Peter Farry was probably the perfect straight man for Gene to be the clown. So and Gene was sort of more the heel commentator as well. So But gee, they just fed off each other so well. And I suppose for a gauge for us, like sometimes, we used to try and do stupid things out there because for us, if we could crack up the commentators, that was a win for us too. So we used to do things on purpose just to try and get them to put them off and stuff like that. So like generally, if you did something silly, I always knew when we did it right because Gene would always have his head down. So you always knew you did something right. I know I did a tag match. I teamed up with Gene's brother, and because he worked under the mask, he had the Union Jack vest, and a lot of the times back then they used to announce me a lot as being formerly from England mainly because my mum was English, and so we had this English team. So we called ourselves the Royal Pains in the Arse. So we thought it would be original. And because we were working in Epping, but we were working at the Macedonian club. So the crowd's predominantly Macedonian. So naturally we've come out, we've done the whole mic spot, telling the crowd about how the Queen doesn't like Macedonians and all that stuff. Anyway, we then proceeded to sing God Save the Queen. And because we had to sort of turn our back to the commentators because I knew if I looked at them, then we weren't going to be able to get through the song. So by the time we finished, Gene's sort of sitting there, right, yes, the mic down, the tears running. So that was, And Peter was probably better under pressure. You always heard him giggling on the microphone, but he could still get a sentence out. Gene was opposite. Once he lost it, he has trouble getting a sentence out for a couple of minutes. But so I suppose that was a good gauge for us. We always knew what we were doing by the commentators reacting. So they're definitely the big unsung heroes, I think. You get a lot of people who work behind the scenes. You get the ones who turn up and set up the rings, and the ones who work at the canteen and work on the door and do the camera work, do the music. It takes so many people to put on a show, and a lot of these people never even get noticed. So it's usually the guys and the girls who are out there performing that get all the acknowledgement for it. But it just doesn't work if they're not in sync. Then the rest of the show doesn't work. So they're the ones for me.
What do you enjoy most from when you're in professional wrestling?
What do I enjoy the most?
Yeah.
For me, it was the camaraderie with all the guys. Backstage, it was just such a great feeling. It was like a family. It really was. And you'd get together, even if you didn't see each other outside wrestling, as soon as you saw each other backstage, it was like you were just great old mates, and there was never any really hostility, or it was just everyone get along well. And for me, that was they were really good times. They're the things I probably enjoyed the most. Just being able to actually catch up with the guys every week, and go on the road with guys, and they're the adrenaline rush that you get when you're out there as well. Like you can't explain that unless you've lived it. You do stuff out there in the ring that you wouldn't dare do in normal life. Because you think, gee, that'll hurt. But when you're out in the ring, you don't even think twice about it. You don't. Hey, Jed. You don't even think twice about taking a bump through a table or falling off the top of a ladder, or those sorts of things. It's just like, let's just do that. If someone did that, if you set up a ladder in your backyard and say, jump off that and land through a table, you wouldn't do it. So but the adrenaline it gets to you, and you'll do anything. So I've done some crazy spots over the years, but I've never felt dangerous or in danger doing them. So
We'll lead to the end. I'm just going to ask you two more questions. One is, do you have any wrestling media online platforms at all? Because some people have like online media platforms.
No, not really. There's not really much of my stuff out there at all. I think there's maybe a handful of matches on YouTube. There's not a lot out there. I don't really have any social media set up for myself. I tend to just I suppose I don't really self promote as such. Especially now. I suppose I've sort of my days in the ring are pretty much done now. I've sort of moved away from the business. The last few years, I've moved sort of in other areas. Where I've been coaching football for the last 5 years. So coaching women's football. So that's been a big step in a different direction altogether. So, but similar sort of principles, I guess. As far as training people and teaching people, and it's just knowing how to handle each one individual differently and that kind of thing. So, different world from wrestling, of course. But it's football's always been another big passion of mine. I was still playing football as well until I was, I think, 47 when I retired. Played my last game. Actually got to run out on the ground and play with my son for my last game. So that was really cool. But yeah, so life just takes you in different directions. But yeah. That's it, really.
I'll lead on to my final question, but James just asked this.
Highlander?
Yeah, what was Highlander like to let you?
Actually, like I loved working with Highlander, but when you first start, and you'll find that because he came from like a bodybuilding background, so all guys I found that came from bodybuilding backgrounds or martial arts backgrounds, they were all really stiff, when they first start out. And it takes a while to teach them to actually loosen up a bit. And that was the thing when you go from things where you're supposed to be all tense and stiff all the time, and you come into the wrestling where it's completely the opposite. So it took him a little while, but he once he got there, he really got the business, and he had a really good appreciation of it. And I think we worked a few matches together, and I loved working with him because I always try to do something to take him out of his comfort zone. And I think the first time I worked with him, I'm trying to remember what we actually did, but I did something, and Jim DeMeriff was promoting, and he's like, "How did you get him to do that?" I'm like, "Oh, easy. I wanted him to do something that he doesn't normally do." So, and then we did another match a couple of months later, and Jim came up to me and goes, "Oh, what have you got him doing tonight?" I said, "Oh, we'll just have to wait and see." And so I actually got him to give me a Hurricane Rada off the top rope, which was really out of his comfort zone. So, but yeah, like the crowd loved it because it was just, they wouldn't have expected it coming from him. So, he was a much bigger guy than me. So the fact that he was doing that move to me, it actually got a really good pop too. So, But no, I loved working with him. I loved traveling with him. He was great fun to travel with. Again, one of those guys that I did a Sydney trip one time. There was like 3 or 4 of us on the trip, and he was the class clown for the whole trip. He was fantastic. Kept the mood really light. He was good fun to have around. Good guy too, really good guy.
Awesome. What I'll ask you, when I gave Peter Barry the platform, he went on a rant. I don't know if you want to go on a rant, but anything you'd like to leave us with, like thoughts, etc., regarding thoughts?
Well, no, I don't really feel a need for any rants or anything, but Look, yeah, I think what we just need to see now is, you know, a bit of unity with the wrestling. Yeah, it's such a great business and such a great fun thing to be part of. That, yeah, I think if everyone can just, you know, find a way somehow to work together and actually get the, you know, get things on the one page, they could make some great headways. You know, if they all got on the one page, there's no reason they couldn't put some really big shows on, or couldn't put all their talent together. And you know, who knows? Maybe they could approach television or get something started. There's so many networks nowadays, and now with all the streaming services, you know, if they just put all the us against them mentality aside, they could do some really incredible things. Like, yeah, but it's a matter of people, egos being put aside and stuff like that. So unfortunately, I can't see it quite happening because I think egos are always probably the biggest downfall with our business. Some people do like to believe their own publicity. You know, they get a big push and they think they're really the stars of the show, and yeah, it kind of ruins it a bit for everyone else, I think. But I think that's pretty much it. Just, you know, get off your ass, work hard, work together, and you know, it could be an amazing business, and it could still work. It could still be something great. But yeah, you just got to put all that ego aside to make that happen, unfortunately.
I mentioned to Peter about consultancy. Would he offer consultancy to people in the modern era? What's your thoughts on that? With like your background as a wrestling trainer, do you reckon like you have anything to offer the current like people training people?
Yeah, look, I'm always open to the ideas, but again, at the moment, I live 2 hours out of Melbourne, so that kind of makes things a bit difficult. Otherwise, I'll be more than happy to go and train or to speak or you know, even commentate or manage or whatever. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that kind of stuff.
You
You
do
know,
like
I think the
online
hard
Zoom
part I find with
consultancy?
training now is I physically can't do it. My shoulder's completely stuffed, so I'm still waiting on a full reconstruction for my shoulder. So I can't really physically take bumps anymore. So it makes it hard to sort of set the example when you can only talk about it. But look, I'm happy to always, yeah, put my hand up. But unfortunately, again, a lot of them don't want to know the older guys anymore. Yeah, they're all sort of like, oh, but that's old school. I'm like, well, yeah, it's old school, but old school worked for over 100 years, and there's a reason for that. You know, so yeah, there's so many of us guys out there who would be happy to jump on board, happy to help out, or you know, even if it's just, if it's not wrestling, it's teaching referees, teaching commentators, learning how to conduct an interview, learning how to speak. Just some of these kids struggle with public speaking, you know, and that was always, I know that was a big emphasis when I had training guys. You know, once every like 4 to 6 weeks, we'd bring a camera down to training and make every one of them actually cut a promo in front of everyone. And it was good because yeah, some of them were really shy, and it actually brought a bit out of them, and it was really good. So when they came time to do shows, they felt comfortable. If they had a mic shoved under their nose, we knew that they could do enough to at least handle themselves. So I think like I said, there's so many guys out there who'd be happy to help in that way. But unfortunately, a lot of them don't want to reach out. That's the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a bit sad too because in some ways, like I'll give credit to what does work, but like for all this modernisation, modern wrestling stuff, and people whinge about old school, well, it makes no sense to me because it's like they're whinging about what works. A lot of the old school stuff works, where a lot of the modern stuff doesn't even work.
Yeah. And look,
Jack just said that was the best part of your training.
Yeah, and look, it's wrestling it's like I said, 90% of it's all up here. So anyone can make anyone look good if they do it properly. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of emphasis on like flashy logos production, and the women's wrestling's come a long way, but I find a lot of modern wrestling. Like you're
that's one
saying,
thing that the women's wrestling is one thing that I think is really good at the moment. And the fact that they're not like through the 90s, and this is all, Vince McMahon was probably the big culprit here. He's basically turned them into a tits and ass show, and and didn't really give them respect as wrestlers. Whereas I think that's turned around now, and women are finally starting to actually earn their own respect in that field, and I think that is fantastic for the business as well, because you get women on the shows. They're a great draw. They're a great draw card. And look, you've only got to look back. What was it, 3 or 4 years ago? 3 women main evented WrestleMania. Yeah, because they were the most over in the company. Which probably didn't say a lot for the rest. A lot of the other guys who were on the company as well. But they had great characters, and they were interesting, and they were great workers. They could actually really do a good solid match. So kudos. It's great, and I'd love to see a bit more of that. And we've got some really good ones out there now. That really, it's good to see them actually getting some of their acknowledgement. So
there's some Charlotte Flair, for example. I see so much of her dad in her wrestling, where I can actually really appreciate watching her matches. I see so much of Ric Flair and Charlotte when she wrestles and has a good match.
Yeah, look, Charlotte, she was fantastic, and she took it up later in her life too. She sort of, just all sat in the background. It wasn't something she took up until much later, but you just see the genetics are there, and then someone like Ronda Rousey, even who's come from a different background, but the way that they've incorporated her martial arts into the wrestling world, so it still looks very much that martial arts, but they've got to the point where it's also a bit of a work as well. It's great because it's a whole new style, but it's all based on mat work and grappling, and you don't really see her doing much off the top rope. And so I think that's where it's really worked for her as well. So, and like, she already had a great reputation before she stepped into that, and I think the fact that she's been able to adjust as well. And like I was saying before, when you get people with martial arts backgrounds and stuff like that, they're usually really stiff when they first start off. So it takes them a couple of years to really loosen up, and but you can see the difference in her now compared to when she first started. She's nowhere near as stiff as she was.
Yeah, I think Ronda Rousey, when she got into MMA, before MMA, actually was a student of Judo Jean LaBelle, who was like a famous martial artist and pro wrestler, which is quite interesting.
Okay, I didn't know that. But yeah.
Are you familiar with Jean LaBelle?
No, not really, but
he had like a bit of publicity. He's an old-time pro wrestler. He was meant to be Bruce Lee's grappling instructor, and he apparently choked out Steven Seagal and made Steven Seagal kill himself.
Okay.
Because Steven Seagal, there was some argument they had, but Jean LaBelle was known as I think his family were promoters or something. Jean LaBelle was like the guy who, if someone pissed off the promoter, he would injure the person. So
very good.
He was pretty old school.
I didn't know a lot about that, but yeah.
But I think with WWE, Ronda Rousey's starting to do really well now, but I think she could have done better when she come into WWE. But I don't think it's completely her fault. I think there's a lot of elements at play with just the setup of things too.
Yeah, I mean, they did well cashing in on her, MMA stuff, because it they made her look even more badass than she already was. So, and they promoted her that way, so it was really good. So
I love the stuff with
bums on the seats for them. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see which way they go now. So,
yeah, I love the stuff with that angle, and there was like after their WrestleMania tag match, there was like a moment on Raw where she like just beats the shit out of Kurt Angle from memory. That was well done. My favorite.
I think I have seen bits of that. I didn't see a lot of it. I don't watch a lot of it anymore. But yeah, apart from what I see on social media and stuff like that, that's pretty much what I see nowadays.
Yeah, my favorite crossover pro wrestler, even though he had a background as a pro wrestler before that, was Ken Shamrock. He become famous in UFC, and then he got back into pro wrestling. He's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I got to briefly meet him when he came out here a few years ago. Actually, seemed like a decent guy. So, I suppose for me, my favourites growing up was like Bret Hart was one, Owen Hart, Randy Savage. They're probably the three that I probably modelled myself on most especially when I first started. They're probably the ones that, I used to try and emulate and copy a fair bit. So
Ken Shamrock's probably my favourite MMA pro wrestler, but my favourite of all time was probably Mick Foley.
Foley, yeah. See, I don't mind Foley. He probably got the best out of himself, didn't he? So, for a guy who, limited ability, but he knew how to work, and he knew how to get that wow factor out of the crowd. So, I think that's why he went so well.
Yeah, I think he was really good at brawling and psychology, and there was a lot of Bruiser Brody in him especially when he was tapped his back.
Yeah, and he couldn't have handpicked better guys. Like he would have learnt from Brody. He would have learnt from Terry Funk. I mean, you got great teachers right there, haven't you? So, you can't go wrong with that.
Oh, definitely. So, it's been a pleasure anyway. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
And may catch up another time. Enjoy your weekend, whatnot. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, look, thanks. It's been a pleasure. It's been a while since I've actually been able to sit down and just sort of talk wrestling. So I've been so consumed in football for the last 5 years that almost forgotten what it's like to talk wrestling. It's it's good. Every now and then you catch up with some of the guys, and it's good you catch up and reminisce a bit and talk about old stories and have a bit of a laugh, and gets the juices flowing, and you kind of wish that you could wind back 30 years and just do it all again. It would be so much fun, but unfortunately,
I rode in mid fights.
But unfortunately, time marches on, and we gets to that point. So look, for all you young wrestlers out there, enjoy it, because it's over before you know it, unfortunately.
Oh, definitely. A lot of food for thought, for sure. It's been a pleasure once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Will do.
Talk to you again another time, and it was a pleasure chatting to you. A lot of great food for thought.
Yeah, likewise. It's been good to have a chat. Really enjoyed it. So thank you for having me on.
No worries. I appreciate your time.
No worries. Thanks, mate.
Catch up. Bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. Just finished speaking with Red Hot Ricky Diamond. Really enjoyed the conversation. A lot of great food for thought. I really appreciate his time. I do have a tendency of getting carried away though, so I've probably got to learn how to look at how to work a match. Ha ha ha. Look at how to like treat it like if you're in a ring, you've got limited time and you've got to know when to call it. But yeah, it was a great interview. A lot of great stories, a lot of great knowledge there. 23 years experience as a pro wrestler and also trained a lot of talent. And he had as a young fella, experience just sparring, mucking around with his brother, who was a pro wrestler, Dazzler Dunlop. So was brought up in pro wrestling and the knowledge of it. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone who commented. My hat's off to you. My hat's off to Red Hot Ricky Diamond. And I appreciate Dazzler Dunlop and Red Hot Ricky Diamond being on Good Cuppa of LLJ with me. There's another Good Cuppa of LLJ, the first one I did with Dazzler Dunlop. That's worthwhile checking out. Spoke to him about his book, Dazzler Dunlop, which you can buy through Amazon. And I think the people who publish it, they also have a website, is Sean. I can never remember the name of it, Sean something. But yeah, it is on Amazon as well. So yeah, Amazon's a pretty mainstream platform. But I'll let you go anyway. It's been a pleasure. We'll do a countdown and then that'll be it. Yeah, been a pleasure. Really appreciate chatting to Red Hot Ricky Diamond. Lots of great food for thought. I really enjoyed it. Feeling really inspired. Really enjoyed like the chat we had. A lot of great stories, a lot of great knowledge. I'll do one more countdown. I'm doing my teasing stuff, and then I'm definitely gonna have to leave. Been a pleasure. Appreciate Red Hot Ricky Diamond's time today. Peace.